The story of how you got from India to Microsoft in the early 90s is not your typical immigrant story. You describe yourself as a not so ambitious student. You failed an entrance exam. You said you wanted to play cricket and work at a bank. And yet here you are, the CEO of one of the biggest technology companies in the world. What is the lesson in that?
I was not really planning on looking back at my life. I was mostly thinking about, hey, what's the transformation that we're going through while we're going through it, because that was the real motivation. But with some encouragement, I went back and tried to sort of trace what are these hit refresh moments, so to speak, even from my past. I think the thing that I now recognize more so than when I was growing up is the space I got. I think that the ability to think for yourself, the ability to follow your own passion versus trying to fit a particular mold, in the long run has been more beneficial than any academic excellence in the short run could have. And that, I think, is something that I now think is perhaps as important as we think about all of what we say is needed in education.
The most powerful moments for me in the book are the family moments. It's really a love story for your wife and for your children, your son, Zane, who was born with severe cerebral palsy. How has Zane changed you as a person and as a leader?
You know, when Zane was born, I was 29, and if you had even asked me just the night he was born, a few hours before, what was sort of going through my head, I would have been more, when is Anu, my wife, going to get back to work as an architect? Or is the nursery going to be ready? How are our weekends going to change? And yet, that night, everything changed when he was born because of his in utero asphyxiation, and he had severe brain damage, which led to cerebral palsy. But for the first couple of years, I must say, I struggled with it. In fact, everything that I thought was my plan, in some sense, fell apart. And it was all about me, and why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to us? It was only watching my wife and what she did. She immediately, just the very next day after a C-section, she stepped up and started caring for Zane. And in some sense, over the years, without actually schooling me, she schooled me that nothing happened to me. Something happened to Zane, and I needed to step up as his father. And that, to me, is perhaps that most tough lesson that life teaches you, is to be able to see life through others' eyes. And that, to me, is perhaps where a bit of more of this need for empathy comes from. It definitely changed who I was as a person, whether it's at home or at work.
In working with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer over 2.5 decades, what are the things you want to emulate, and what are the things you want to do differently?
I think both Bill and Steve, one of the things that is just pretty stunning to me is their intellectual honesty. What I mean by that is their ability to see things good and bad, but most importantly, things that need to be improved with such clarity. And I've always felt that at Microsoft there would be lots of people who would run around wanting to be like Bill and Steve, except that we would not have that same level of intellectual honesty. But that is just such a high standard, and more importantly, such an inspiring standard they set for all of us.
So, when you came in, you got the job and you said, look, there's a lot to fix at Microsoft. The company is sick. The company has lost its soul. How do you come in and say everything needs to be fixed without offending them?
Well, I mean, in fact, when I think the courage to be able to both look at what needs to be fixed and also recognize what is good. The smarts for that, I think, is something that I, quite frankly, learned from those. In fact, Bill in his forward probably captures the logic of hit refresh the best, which is it's not about changing everything, it's about changing what needs to be changed, and therein lies the trick, so to speak. But they were very clear. In fact, Steve's last piece of advice to me was be your own person. And I'm a consummate insider. I grew up in the company that Paul and Bill founded and Steve and Bill created. And so to me, I I was part of the same journey. I'm proud of that journey. Yet, I had that outsider's perspective, as best as one can have, having grown up there, to be able to say, hey, look, these are things that we absolutely need to change.
So when you and Bill Gates disagree, what happens?
Well, look, today Bill's very clear. Look, I'm the CEO. Bill can give me the most critical feedback, but it's up to me to make sure that I'm leading the company. And so there is no confusion on that. But I value, quite frankly, if Bill disagrees, it's something that I probably should go look at again.